Hi, so my name is Caitlin. I'm a PhD student at the University of Hull, and I'm going to be talking to you about discussions of gender, specifically within net zero and climate resilience. So, my research is going to be bridging the gap between net zero and climate resilience for a socially and environmentally sustainable LA 2028, focusing on the Olympics. So I do get to go to LA for fieldwork, which is really cool. And you may notice my presentation is super pink. I thought LA, gender studies, Barbie, like jumping on that trend. So as I go through, I'm going to be talking to the what and why of the research before looking at some brief theory with gender within the climate, net zero and climate resilience separately, then bringing gender into that discussion and taking you through a systematic literature review. So what is this about? So this presentation plays an important part in the foundation of my project and the larger PhD project. So women and girls are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis at an alarming rate compared to their male counterparts. From the physical in Bangladesh, where it's socially unacceptable for women and girls to learn to swim, lowering their chances of surviving floods, all the way through to decision makers, where it is and has been studied, and results have shown that women are underrepresented in climate discussions. And not only that, but women also have been proven to have different inputs within discussions of climate change. So with regards to gender within the climate, they've been largely gender blind, so they haven't been taken into consideration or account. And one of the ways we can incorporate this discussion is through ecofeminism. So ecofeminist theory was officially emerged from the intersection of feminist studies and the arising movements for social justice and environmental health. I use brackets to say officially because that is when it gained prominence within Western notions, although there is a really good book called Ecofeminism by Maria Mies and Vandana Shiva, where they also look at the kind of intersectionality and focus a lot on different areas of the world, not just kind of Western women. And within climate change, there is absolutely a place for feminist theory. And whilst it does have its flaws, as with every theory, the aim is to bring equality and equity of the genders and sexes by also bringing about equality and equity with the natural and ecological world. Ecofeminists typically view kind of women and girls as being jointly oppressed in relation to the environment and natural world, so it's kind of the same, two sides of the same coin. So they view that balance and cooperation rather than dominance and hierarchy is a necessity for the survival of all living beings. And then similarly to feminism and the environment, net zero and climate resilience are often viewed as two very different topics. They're not typically integrated. Net zero is often thought of a very scientific concept, whereas climate resilience is often thought a lot more abstract and kind of very spatially through geography as well. So net zero itself is, it kind of is what it says on the tin. In terms that we're going to cut emissions, but it's the way that it's negotiated that is often disputed. So, for example, the UN would say we want to cut our greenhouse gases as close to zero as possible and then offset what we have. Others would say, you know, we can continue emitting as much emissions as we like as long as we offset them all by planting loads of trees. Whereas climate resilience is viewed in a very different kind of way to that, and it varies often person by person, locally to globally. And early origins of resilience go back, you know, way back to indigenous communities as well, and kind of imply strength and resistance to something, although it has been seen in recent years kind of within disaster management studies. For me, when bridging the concept, the bridge for this would be adaptation. It's a social, cultural, political, and economic bridge. And it focuses on the kind of integration, the need for integrated strategies, policy alignment, community engagement in order to address mitigation and resilience goals, and thereby creating a more sustainable and resilient future. So net zero climate resilience, when bridged or separate, is often deemed as gender blind. It doesn't take into account how men and women both experience lowering emissions, shocks, or stresses. There have been some places such as India that have included gender discussions within their policy, but this is by no means universal. And there are many examples as to why we should be including gender within our discussions. For example, Males typically dominate the fossil fuel industry, whereas women often feel the brunt of this. So from the micro, where women run along heavily polluting roads rather than through a quiet green park at night, all the way over to the macro, where kind of disruptions in ecosystems and resources mean that women often bear the brunt of these changes, as they are primarily responsible for the household and the running of the community. And these effects are even more prevalent within the kind of global south and poorer communities too. So I carried out a systematic literature review of the below search terms into 3 different databases, and I used the term women or woman as a metric rather than kind of men and alongside gender because of the way in which women are disproportionately affected. So first, an initial systematic literature review focused on just net zero and climate resilience, so without taking gender into account. And the main kind of words pulled through was change, capacity, and emissions. Once gender was brought into this discussion, there were far, far less search results that came out kind of echoing that gender blindness. And the words that were pulled out consisted of changing, climate, community, households, disproportionate access, and almost kind of zooms in on these preconceived gender roles that we have within society, where women are kind of associated with tasks such as managing the household or being, involved in the community. And kind of an example of this is within a local school, you tend to find mums are a large member of the PTA community. It's also very interesting to note that through the findings, there are almost double the instances of women being referenced with climate resilience rather than net zero. This again kind of echoes those gender roles. So net zero is typically seen as scientific and therefore kind of a male-dominated industry. And really interestingly, almost all of the articles mentioning women encouraged further action to be taken and all kind of gave recommendations taken to promote the well-being and safety of women in the community and inclusion of women within decision-making. So from this research, in order to create a more sustainable and resilient future, we must be adapting as a society to break down the gender barriers. So overall, this study is so important and it kind of sets the foundation for the rest of the PhD project in promoting equality and equity in order for us to adapt as a society. One of the ways we can do this is by having more women within decision-making bodies, as it has been proven that not having that representation does inhibit the climate action on both a local and global scale. And I'm going to leave you here with a book recommendation I read over Christmas, thank you to my supervisor, that examines the data gap of not just women within the environment, but also women globally. So thank you very much.